Well, hello, my friend. I am so excited to see you. For me, it is the evening time. For you, it is probably much earlier in the day in Hawaii. Just so glad to be having this conversation. So excited for you on your publication of your book. And we're going to talk all about that tonight. Preventable is the title. And thank you for making the time to come back and talk to our membership.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here, Liz. It's always a pleasure to chat with you and your people and all the folks that are here with us. It's really just an honor. So thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, congratulations on your book. I really do want to dig in there because you and I, when we met, it was just like we couldn't get enough of like the like-minded nature of what it is that we are teaching. And I love the title of your book, Preventable. And I just want to talk a little bit about what was the inspiration for you as a physician? What was the inspiration that said, like, I'm going to sit down and write a book? I mean, that is like a big thing to do.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it wasn't on my original sort of agenda, if you will. And what happened, which is kind of a little bit about the whole journey, is that about 10 years ago, when I hit 40, I was feeling great personally because I was doing a lot of really, good health practices myself, but I was seeing people come in to see me in the ER in the hospitals that I was working at, both ER setting, urgent care setting, mostly ER. That's my specialty over the years. But I was seeing people younger than I in their 30s or early 40s with things like heart attack, even stroke, pretty significant type 2 diabetes and lots of complications. And I was just scratching my head going, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds, even 50-year-olds really shouldn't be having heart attacks. It's just not something that should be going on. When I trained in medical school 30 years ago, basically everybody that I was seeing with heart attacks was in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. And nowadays it's 30s, 40s, and 50s. And it's crazy. I mean, literally one person every 30 seconds has a heart attack in this country. And the overwhelming majority of preventable deaths, not just in the US, but worldwide, are from heart disease. And so I love what I do in the hospital setting. I'm a board certified physician working largely in emergency rooms throughout the country. And I love helping people in that acute time of need. But what was getting at me was how so many people were affected that didn't need to be. Like, these things can be prevented. There's so much that we can actually do to not only live a better life and have the energy we want on a day-to-day basis, but to prevent a lot of the suffering that happens. And
Yeah.
I just wanted to get that message out and share it. So I made myself sit down and write this book. It took me almost 10 years to do so. And it's so nice to finally have it out.
Amazing. I'm going to ask you, maybe we can turn your microphone. I'm having you go in and out just a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, that'll be better. I think
Is
maybe
that
a little.
better? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. Because I know people are going to want to hear what you have to say. So that's amazing. Like, you just started to notice this difference, this change. What I love about what I've, really picked up, again, a similarity between you and me is this ability to concisely talk about very difficult and hard to explain processes in a really simple way. And the word simple comes up so often when I was reading your book. And that's I think the hard thing about what it is that we're trying to teach is the simplicity of it almost makes it difficult. Talk a little bit about that simplicity and what you've seen for people as they try to navigate the simplicity.
Yeah, no, that's totally true. And I think somehow, some way we think that naturally for something to be worthwhile, for it to be good, for it to be effective, that it has to be complicated. And I think just the opposite. I think complexity is actually the enemy here. The more complex we make things, the more we will struggle trying to make the changes. And so it's got to be really, really simple. And let me just give you an example. So when people ask me, like, what's the best exercise for me, doc? Like, what is the one thing that's going to make that difference? And I say, honestly, the best exercise for you is the one that you will do every single day. So for most people, that's just taking a simple walk. And it sounds crazy. It sounds way too easy, but it is that simple. If you walk every single day for 30 minutes, your health will tremendously improve. And if you want to spice it up a little bit and make that 10 minutes after every meal. So you say you eat breakfast in the morning and then you walk for 10 minutes, lunch, then you walk for 10 minutes, dinner, then you walk for 10 minutes. You don't have to find 30 minutes in your whole, day and block it out. You can literally just take 10 minutes after you eat every single time. It's simple, but yet it is so powerful in that way. In fact, there was a recent study that came out that showed that when you do that, when you move your body after eating, it's actually even more effective when you do it that way, because it helps with your blood sugar control. It decreases the chances that you'll get this very common problem called insulin resistance that, gosh, almost 9 out of 10 people in the US have to some degree. It's so pervasive and most people don't even know they have it. But when you walk after you eat, it really helps with that blood sugar balance, your metabolism, and you just feel better. You digest your food better. You'll sleep better at night. And it's such a simple practice. So simple is effective, and things do not have to be complicated. I would say, and I'll just borrow the words, I don't know who came up with it, if it was Jim Rohn or Tony Robbins or whoever, but complexity is the enemy of execution, of getting things done. The more complex you make it, the less chance you are going to follow up and succeed with it. So keep it simple.
I love it. That's amazing. Well, and you have sort of five topics that you really cover in the book. Can we just like briefly touch on those? Yeah, some of my ladies are chiming in. We were just talking about this walking after dinner piece, and I was kind of bringing your name up and saying like, we learned a lot from you on our last call about those practices of like sort of having dinner and trying to give yourself some space,
Yeah.
getting some movement, and actually not eating maybe for 2 to 3 hours before bed. And the whole membership really has resonated with that of like, again, so simple, right? But the complexity of, what should it be, 2 hours or 3 hours? And we talk so much about the ish here, right? The ish, if it's 2-ish, that's fine. If it's 3-ish, that's fine. The enemy is making it rigid and complex, and something that once you fail, you're out of the pocket. So yeah.
No, I couldn't agree more with that. And I'll just give a quick, Reader's Digest version of the 5 practices that I describe in the book. And I love to keep it simple. In fact, as a previous medical student, we were expert at developing memory tools. And, we call these mnemonics. So I developed one myself for these 5 principles, and it's MSGs, right? We hate MSG anyway, make it plural and put an F in front of it because we love to hate it. And so F is for food.
Okay.
Food, that powerful. Food is the starting point of our ideal, that optimal health that we would all like to have. It starts with food. It starts with what lies at the tip of our fork. And it can be so simple. When I tell you the one thing that matters most, you're going to just go, I can't be that. And that one thing is just eat real food. That's it. In fact, my philosophy, we probably said this in the first call, Liz, is I love to encourage people to add more than they subtract, because there really are only 3 things that you should subtract from your diet. And those are things which are highly processed grains and flours, sugars, of course, highly processed, the worst, highly processed grains and flours, number 1, the sugars, especially the highly processed ones like high fructose corn syrup, and of course, all the artificial sweeteners as well. And then number 3 is the seed oils, those industrial oils, as I like to call them. They are so pervasive. They're everywhere. They're literally in everything that comes with a label, even stuff that you wouldn't think. Like I was just on an airplane yesterday and they said, do you want the nuts or this or that? I'm like, oh, I love nuts. Nuts are my friend. They're my snack food of choice. I love to dip into some nuts, but I usually bring my own. I was not in Hawaii. So typically when I leave from Hawaii, I carry a whole bag of macadamia nuts because they're my favorite.
Of course.
And so I was coming from Florida back home to Hawaii. I didn't have any macadamia nuts. So I took the bag of nuts and I flipped it over, and I was so sad to see that it was roasted in canola oil. And canola oil is one of these industrial oils. And so I was like, no, thank you. And, I didn't want those nuts that badly. And so they're everywhere, even places that they shouldn't be. That the health food has these, I just like to call them industrial oils because that's what they really are. Everybody likes to call them seed oils, but they go through so much processing. They are so inflammatory, and they're everywhere. Almost everything with the label has it. Even if it says olive oil salad dressing, you look in there, olive oil is like ingredient number 10. Ingredient number 2 is canola oil or soybean oil. It's really deceptive. The marketing, they try to make it so that it makes me a little bit angry to
It's
see how they
terrible.
market things, because
We
they say olive
did,
oil dressing, and olive oil is
yeah,
like the last of the ingredients. It's really
yeah,
sad, but keep it simple. Simple, as we spoke about, is most important. Just eat real food.
yeah,
Try
we
to
did.
avoid the stuff in a
The,
bag, box,
the
or barcode.
for our membership last night, we had a chef on to talk about making your own salad dressings, and it was so much fun. And we were talking about seed oils, and there were a lot of questions, and I was giving sort of high level, this sort of inflammatory, carcinogenic, like, really tough, processing process that these oils go through, turn them into something, that really is unrecognizable to the body, and creates a reaction within the body. Maybe you can expand on that a little more, because I think there was confusion. You hear these, and we've seen it through all the ages of, like, oh, you should eat margarine. Oh God, you shouldn't eat margarine. Oh my God, you should have canola oil and safflower oil and sunflower oil. And now it's like, oh my God. So people were like, wait, so why can I not have seed oils? When someone asks you for the simple doctor explanation of what happens in your body,
Yeah.
what is it about these oils that just makes you so crazy?
So they are just ultra inflammatory. They are wickedly inflammatory. The reason being is that literally when we buy them, although to the naked eye you can't tell, they are literally rancid when you pull them off the shelf. The reason being, we don't recognize it because they have been processed with ultra high heat, pressure, even deodorizers and bleach. So we can't tell that they're actually rancid. And because of all this processing, they are, when we metabolize them in this little organelle called the mitochondria, which is kind of like the energy power plant of the cell, they literally have a huge plume of, let's just call it smoke, but it's basically biologic inflammation that we call reactive oxygen species, which is basically like dirty fuel. So if you've ever seen like a big diesel truck, it has a plume of like heavy, dirty, sooty type of exhaust that if you were standing next to it, it actually would get on your clothes. It's like that kind of dirty. So when we burn seed oils, that's kind of the exhaust that is given out. And that exhaust is super inflammatory to our bodies. It makes I mean, it's one of those things, Liz, that people, now that you think about it, you'll be like, well, I get it now. When I eat whatever bag of chips or what have you, then a few hours later, I feel like kind of puffy. Your joints, your hands, your wrists, your knees, your ankles, you're like, gosh, I feel a little bit swollen, a little bit puffy after I ate that bag of, just put your favorite thing. Mine is Doritos. My favorite is Doritos. I always have loved them since I was a kid. I
Yeah.
almost never eat them, but when I do, like clockwork, about 2 hours later, I notice I feel puffy. That puffiness is inflammation, and that is caused by largely the seed oils because they burn so dirty and they cause tremendous inflammation.
Amazing. That's so helpful. I just wanted to give everyone a little deeper dive into it. I am not a doctor, but I do know, that the inflammation piece is so real. And, I love that you're helping people to recognize how if we're talking food as your one of, your five pillars, really, it's like really thinking about how you feel a couple hours after that food can be a really wonderful way to sort of go, that isn't maybe the best thing for me. And connecting those dots. I see a lot of times people don't connect those dots, right? And go like, maybe it was the way that I ate yesterday, because I think people have not really resonated with the toxicity in our food supply at this point. So I think beginning to think, just how do I feel a couple hours after I eat that food?
And that's actually, Liz, that's what I've tried to really kind of ingrain in my kids. I have 6 kids and they range from 2 in college down to 2 really young ones in elementary school. And my second to youngest, my penultimate daughter, she has type 1 diabetes, and total, weird random fluke that she got it. But what's been really interesting is kind of going through dietary stuff with her. And we really focus a lot on how things make her feel, so that she can recognize for her own, like, oh, this is why I don't eat XYZ thing, because 30 to 90 minutes later, I don't feel that great after I eat that. And we have the added bonus that we have, a CGM, or a continuous glucose monitor on her. We can actually see how high every single thing she eats spikes her blood sugar, which not everybody can afford, not everybody's had a chance to do, but if you ever get the opportunity, oh my goodness, it is so helpful to see how your body responds to different foods. Because one thing is what you and I just talked about. We can feel, you know, how we, what does our body react? How do we feel after we eat an amazing, salad, like you mentioned, that maybe had a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of lemon, maybe some salt and pepper, a couple super simple things. And it was a delicious salad. We feel great. How do we feel after the bag of Doritos? Not great a few hours later, and so I'm teaching her at a young age to recognize those cues. And then she doesn't even bother me about like, hey, Dad, I want to have like this snack that my friends are having. She's like, I don't even want that because I don't feel good after I
I
eat
don't
it.
feel good. Yeah.
She can decide it herself. She recognizes those cues, which is really important because sometimes we just don't really, we don't think about it. We're like,
Yeah.
gosh, why do I feel crappy today? And it's like, oh yeah, I ate that thing at lunch, that fast food thing, because I didn't have time. I had to get to a meeting, or I was in a rush and I didn't pack my lunch. And it's like, oh, okay, I get it. So those feedback, those are so important for us to kind of be able to put these things into place. But but let me just say, I wanted to wrap up that seed oil thing.
Yes.
The other way I like to explain that is if you just backpedal 2,000 years, nobody ate soybean oil, nobody ate canola oil or safflower oil or sunflower oil or anything that the grocery store says is vegetable oil. You know what we ate? It was fruit oils, right? It was olive oil. It was coconut oil, right? The simple avocado oil. So basically, these are all fruits. These are not seeds at all. These are fruits. And all you have to do to make the oil, you just squeeze it. That's it. You don't need high pressure. You don't need high heat. I mean, you can trample over an olive and it squishes out the oil and boom, you got olive oil. It's so darn simple. We've been doing it for thousands of years. So when people say, well, what are the good kind of oils? The ones that we've been using for thousands of years, tried and true, extra virgin olive oil. And now we have also, of course, coconut oil and avocado oil, which are also just simply pressed, not really processed. So those are the simple kind of safe oils, and they taste so much better. Holy crap.
They do. They taste so good, right? All right. So food is F. Then we have M.
So M is what we talked about right at the beginning, movement. Moving our body. And the crucial thing is just move your body every single day. It doesn't have to be X number of minutes or X type of exercise, but every single day, move your body. The American Heart Association says 150 minutes a week kind of is their minimum, which was, it's 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. So it's like, oh, you can take 2 days off, but why would you want to? I mean, you feel great when you move your body. I do the simple thing that we started out with. I walk after my meals. Right before this call, I was outside riding bikes with my kids because we just had lunch. It's just after lunch here in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And we were out doing a little bike ride just in our driveway. And you just feel so much better when you move your body. But the one thing I will say is nowadays we can appreciate that it's not all about cardio. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, all anybody wanted to talk about was cardio. Cardio is great. It's amazing. I do it several days a week, probably 4 days a week, but it is not the panacea. It's not enough. No. You have to do some version of resistance training or some kind of body weight activity where you're increasing your muscle strength, because one thing that will help you on the day-to-day and for eternity until you're dead is your muscles. Your muscles are the key to longevity. And I feel like they've been ignored in the last couple of decades, especially by people like me, by most doctors. Nobody ever asks you, so what's your weight training regimen look like? It's like, well, how much cardio did you do? How much cardio did you do?
How much exercise?
Cardio is great, but it's not enough. You have to do something with either body weight, which can be simple. It can be like this. You can just do air squats. I'm standing talking to you. I can do air squats. It's that easy. You don't have
wall
to have
push-ups, right?
Wall push-ups or pull-ups or my favorite is the plank. Like there's so many of these things we can do with no added equipment. You don't have need a gym membership. All those things are great if you have them, but you don't need it. I don't have a gym membership, just to be honest.
I mean, lifting and twisting and moving this body. I think it's so interesting as, we're talking about these pillars and my book so well, right? So food is a pillar, movement is a pillar. But what you're talking about now is that movement, almost like, so I separated movement and exercise in my book, and you're separating now movement from exercise, and then there's strength. Right? Is that your S?
That's not my S, but strength is so important. And there's a whole section on in the book with resistance training and things you can do. But the S, FMS, the first one is sleep. You have to pay attention to your sleep. And I'll just be honest, I was the worst offender as far as not paying attention to my sleep for probably 3 or more decades. It wasn't anything that was appreciated when I went to medical school 30 years ago. We knew you had to sleep because if you didn't, you could actually die. If you don't sleep for a certain period of time, you may actually die. It's that bad if you don't sleep. We didn't know why you needed to sleep. So it was kind of annoying. It was like, okay, well, we'll just try to sleep the minimum because we know we can survive off of 3 or 4 hours a night. I did that for almost 20 years. 4 hours a night was my average. And ask me how I felt, or better yet, ask my wife.
Yeah.
I was cranky. I was grumpy. I wasn't fun to be around. And I was, pushing the envelope. I don't have enough hours in the day. I got to do all this work at the hospital. I still want to have time to surf every day. I did not appreciate the value of a good night's sleep. And what was really interesting in 2010, they came out with the data on the so-called glymphatic system of the brain, which is basically how we cleanse, how we get rid of the toxins. We sort of flush all of the daily, waste materials and things out of the system so we can refresh, we can rejuvenate, recharge, and take out the so-called biologic trash, right? I mean, you and I, we have kids. If we never took the trash out at our homes, like, what would that look like? What would that smell like? It would be really gross, right? Like, I take out the trash every day at my house.
Yeah.
That's how often.
Yeah.
And we should do the same with our body. And the primary time that we can do that and do it effectively is while we are sleeping. We need to be asleep for the brain to flush out those glymphatic channels, to get rid of all of the daily, waste products of both metabolism, the toxins that we're exposed to. And hopefully that way we don't have these things build up over the years that may contribute to things like dementia, whether it be Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, what have you. Those things can be flushed out on a daily basis while we are sleeping. So that's one of the cool reasons. Plus, there's this other amazing process called autophagy, which can happen primarily while we sleep and while we are not eating, which is also sort of the body's way of rejuvenating itself, building new cells, getting rid of old ones, recycling, the materials that we can recycle, the amino acids, proteins, etc., and kind of regrow, renew our bodies. And that primarily happens while we sleep as well. And our hormones get balanced. So this is one thing with, I know your group, you're going to find super interesting, because I've worked with a lot of people that tell me, hey, I have the perfect diet. I move my body every day. They check off all the boxes. And then I say, well, how is your sleep? Tell me about your sleep. Oh, well, I get a few 6, hours a night, maybe 7 occasionally, but I'm restless. I wake up a couple of times. I'm like, this may be that sort of area that could make all the difference for you, because they're maybe trying to lose that last 5 or 10 pounds. That just seems so dang stubborn. And when I talk to them about sleep, they're like, you know what, you're right. I'm really not sleeping that well. And so we work on it. There's a bunch of steps, with the environment, with your practices that lead up to sleep, the food thing, don't eat 3 hours before bed, turn off the blue lights, all these things. And they're all in the book. But the thing that's most important is that, number one, you just make it a priority. And you schedule it. For me, I schedule 7 hours every night for sleep. That's my minimum. I like to do 8, but I can't always get to 8. So if I do 7, I am so happy. I love to hit 7 every night. And so you got to schedule it. You got to just make it a priority.
You're talking on a level that I think is really important, though, is that 7 is great, but the quality of those 7 is very important as well. I think really working towards that quality. And, at Target 100, we're using Fitbits and trackers to try to help that understand the quality and what is actually triggering better quality, and seeing people really get into that piece and find out how powerful it can be when you are well rested. So I'm so happy to hear you echoing this detox. We always say it's like, and you can't, if you're looking to lose weight, you can't eat and sleep. So it's a great time to just have time out from food, right? But you're detoxing your body. And when we talked about inflammation, what is that time of day where everything is depuffing?
Yeah,
It
it's
is
a night
at
while
night.
you're resting, while you're recharging.
So if you did have that
Absolutely.
bag of Doritos, that's when you really need your sleep, because your body needs time to like work through it and get it out. It's such an efficient, amazing machine. So I love that we're echoing this. So,
Yeah,
okay.
sleep and you just said the whole tracker thing. I've used one off and on, and they're really fun. They're really interesting, but they're not necessary, right? If you can't afford one, it's totally fine. I don't have one on now. I just have my waterproof surfing watch, but I've used those in the past, and they're super interesting. They're insightful. They give you a lot of data. Sometimes they get you excited when you hit the score in the 90s. You're like, sweet. And then when you're at 50 or 60, you're like, but then if you backpedal and you try to figure out why you were at 50 or 60,
There you go.
it all kind of makes sense, and you can use that to your advantage. And so you don't need one. We know how we feel when we get a good night's sleep, whether the tracker says it or not. Usually it will agree, but you get that awesome 8 hour, super restful. You didn't wake up at all to pee. You didn't hear, nothing got you up. You slept soundly the whole night. Maybe it was out camping at a lake or who knows what on the beach. You had a condo by the beach. You heard the ocean in the background, whatever it was, you had that night's sleep. You know what it feels like. It
Yeah.
feels amazing. And so
Amazing.
you don't need the tracker, but it definitely pay attention to how your body feels and then make the tweaks. And I put all the stuff in the book, the sort of best
Right.
sleep regimen, if you will. The shortest way to explain it, Liz, is just like you and I know very well from having kids. They need a bedtime ritual, a routine. Guess what? We as adults, we need that too. We need a routine. And
Yeah.
so build that routine so you can do it every night. So it's so simple. It's not complicated, right? The 3-2-1 rule, turn off. Well, the first thing is don't eat 3 hours before bed, 2 hours before bed. Try not to do any really heavy exercise. 1 hour before bed. Don't be on your screens, right? Most people say 2 hours before bed, but let's be realistic. Like, who can stay
Yeah.
off their screens
Let's
for
be
2
real.
hours? I
Yeah.
can't do it. So if
Yeah.
I can't do it, I'm not going to tell you to do it.
I can tell us to
I
do it.
set mine at 1 hour, but if it's 30 minutes for you, celebrate that. Do 30 minutes. Whatever is that non-negotiable that you know that you can do, set it at that. And then if you want to raise it every month or two, perfect. But don't make it so hard that you can't hit it, because then you feel bad about yourself, and this whole cycle, it just becomes more challenging. Just set the benchmark you can do for yourself. Make it a non-negotiable. And if that's today, 6 hours of sleep because you usually sleep 4 or 5, perfect. Maybe in a few months, it'll be 7. And then maybe ultimately you get to 8, but just do it incrementally. You don't have to make these, big changes overnight. Keep it simple.
Well, okay. So then we have a G and an S.
Okay. So G is my favorite thing to talk about, but we'll just scratch the surface because it's, hours I could get into this. In fact, in the book, it's a little bit, I put a few more chapters on this topic. It's gut health. Gut health is so important. But what's cool is that it basically ties everything together. So when you sleep well, guess what? Your gut health gets better. The bacteria down there, they know when you're sleeping and when you're not just Santa Claus, right? These guys know also because they can tell, and it affects them. It affects their makeup, or what we call diversity, right? So if you get a good night's sleep, you're actually improving your microbial diversity in your gut microbiota. When you exercise, same thing. They get in a more diverse fashion, which is what we like. Diversity is the spice of life, not just sort of in a global way, but also with our gut, with the bacteria that live in our gut. We want to have a very diverse makeup, and we want to have all the healthy stuff. We want to have lots of lactobacillus. We want to have, the one that everybody wants to talk about today is Akkermansia, because it's so cool, right? It protects the lining of the gut. So you'll be less likely to get leaky gut, for example, which is just a term for inflammation when it happens from those leaky linings between the cells called the intestinal epithelial cells. When they don't have a really tight, intact border, they can let stuff in that shouldn't be let in. It could be pieces of food that are undigested, allergens, could be bacteria, all these things that aren't supposed to go from the outside, which is basically what our intestines are. Whatever we eat is the outside world. And then when it crosses that cell, it gets into our bloodstream, right? So we don't want toxins in there. We don't want bacteria in there. We don't want undigested food in there, because that's a primary cause of food allergies. Like nowadays, Liz, I don't know when your kids went to school, if there was so many allergies out there. My youngest kids, they brought a list home of like all the things they can't take to school. And I'm like, what is going on here? There's so many allergies in my daughter's, first grade class. How is this even possible?
Yeah.
But one of the primary causes is poor gut health. And when you improve the gut health, most of these allergies actually go away. So it's really cool, because most of the immune system, guess where it lives? 65% of it lives in your gut. The gut is so cool. But what's cool is you do all the other things and the gut gets healthier. There's
I
specific
was gonna
stuff too.
say, like, your
But
pillars are so all about, like, if you get that sleep, your gut health increases. If you eat real food, your gut health, if you move your body, your gut health increases. So you're helping us, really understand that it is about something, you know, all of these pieces come together to elevate that gut health, which I think is so great. So I think it's a really exciting topic. Um, Talk a little bit about you know the supplementation that's out there for
okay.
like probiotics and things like
Yeah.
that. I think people would
Yeah.
be interested to know what you think about
Yeah.
animal.
So there's it can be, I'm just gonna say it can be a lot simpler than most of us think, because you go out there and you say you go to your pharmacist or you go to your, nutritionist friend or what have you, they're gonna have a list of so many things. Don't overcomplicate it. It doesn't have to be complicated. So there's a couple, I would say, pretty important bacteria, if you will. They're largely all bacteria that we would take in a probiotic form. And there's a couple that are just super, super helpful. And there's a couple types of lactobacillus, for example, bifidobacterium, akkermansia. There's 4 or 5 that are really key players. We can just call them sort of the core gut team, if you will. And they can be, there's all different companies that make them. I'm not going to say one is better than the other. Some are freeze dried. Usually most of them are. And those, I personally lean towards those because I don't have a place where I can always keep them refrigerated, right? Because there's a lot of them that you have to keep in the refrigerator. And for me, that's just not practical. I travel so much that I want to take my probiotic supplements with me. And so having a refrigerator 24/7 is not practical for me. So I actually get some that are freeze dried and I don't have to worry about refrigeration. And that if you would like to take them, the best time, this is always something people ask me, when should I take them? Well, the best time is actually right before bed, or at least after your last meal, an hour or two, after your last meal, so that you don't have anything in your stomach. Probiotics work best on an empty stomach with a full glass of water, and then with time, a lot of time, because you want them to get incorporated into your microbiota, into your gut. And so if you take them with a bite of food or you eat your meal, it's just going to be harder for them to be able to go to where they need to go and be as useful. So on an empty stomach at the end of the day before you go to sleep, or if you do intermittent fasting and in the morning there's so many hours that you don't eat, you can take them in the morning too. So it just works best if you take them on an empty stomach and you have a few hours before you're going to eat something. For me, it just works better to take them at night. It's just in my routine. I know that's just a part of my routine. So I take them at night. There's some other things too that play into this, as far as this would be in the realm of prebiotics that we're talking about, the actual, bacteria that you ingest in the form of a capsule. That's a prebiotic, or excuse me, that's a probiotic. But there's also prebiotics, which are helpful too, which essentially are fiber. They're like the food, right? They're like the gut food that will help feed the good bacteria, both the ones that you're taking in the probiotic form or the ones that you might be eating. Like if you like kimchi, if you like kefir, if you like natto, some of these fermented foods, that has probiotics, right? That has live bacterial cultures. And so some people are like, well, I don't want to take anything. I just want to eat food. Go for it. There's a lot of things out there, but most people can't get enough servings of really densely rich probiotic food to really meet the requirement. Like, unless you make your own yogurt, it's actually pretty hard to get enough probiotics in store-bought yogurt. You know why, Liz? The problem is they only ferment it for like 2 hours. And
Okay.
so the quantity is so low. The numbers of species in a thing of yogurt, it's tiny. If you make your own yogurt and you ferment it for 24, 36, 48 hours, guess what? You can get a lot more, but most people don't like the taste. It's really sour. It's, I don't know if you've made your own yogurt. I have, and it's a little funky. My kids won't eat it. I like
Yeah.
it because I like the sour. I like sauerkraut. I like kimchi especially. So I kind of dig it, but they won't eat it.
I So can you go into that a little more deeply? Because I think people are confused about prebiotics
Yeah.
versus
Probiotics. Yeah.
probiotics.
Yeah. So the prebiotics, just to keep it simple, it's really just the fiber that will feed the bacteria later. It's gut food. It's fiber. So my favorite, if you want the food approach, it's going to be things like Brussels sprouts, asparagus, anything that's fibrous, that's a vegetable, usually has these are called the starch resistant starches. And you can even, you know, what's cool about this, Liz, and I don't know if your people know this, but you can even kind of do a little hack yourself. Like if you like to have rice every now and again, in Hawaii, the folks here eat rice every single night. And
Yeah.
so I don't, but we'll cook it up once or twice a week. But what we like to do is we make a giant pot of it, and then you keep it in the fridge. And then if you want to have it at any other meal in the week, you reheat it. So if you cook, and this works for rice, it works for pasta, it works for potatoes, those are all starches. But when you cook it and then you cool it, and usually you have to cool it for at least a few hours. I mean, they kind of by the book say 24 hours, but it doesn't have to be that long. But if you bring it down to a cooling point, 36 degrees or something, you keep it there for a few hours, then you heat it again. It actually changes the molecular composition of that starch and makes it into what's called a resistant starch, which is the good kind of starch for your gut bacteria because it feeds them. And for you, it does not spike your blood sugar to the same degree. So it's kind of a little hack. You can turn your favorite, if it's like a poke bowl or something, just make the big pot of the rice at the beginning of the week. And you can use that rice every lunch for your poke bowl and just reheat it if you want. And then you get that added benefit that it will become what's called a resistant starch, which will feed the bacteria because it's a prebiotic, and it won't spike your blood sugar so high. So it's actually better for you that way too. And you can do it with rice, potatoes, noodles, whatever. But basically prebiotics are anything that's a starch that the bacteria use for food. It's the food for them. It's the gut food, if you will. And usually it's vegetables, like I said, Brussels sprouts, asparagus, these kind of fibrous vegetables. They do the trick. And so try to have at least a couple of servings of those every single day. Or if you need to, you can do a fiber supplement. But who wants to choke down all this really heavy duty fibrous stuff, and then it makes you feel bloated afterwards? I mean, but let me just give you a little trick, because I just had this discussion with my dad. He says he hates Brussels sprouts, but you know why he doesn't like them? Because he feels bloated after he eats them, because his gut isn't really healthy right now. So when your gut is not sort of, fine-tuned, if you eat a bunch of fiber, whether it's in the form of Metamucil or something over the counter, or just a bunch of fibrous vegetables, you're going to get gassy because your bacteria aren't really ready for it. So add a little bit at a time. Don't overwhelm the system. Just because I said eat Brussels sprouts, don't eat a whole pound of them tonight. I mean, just start slow, because you'll think, oh, my body doesn't like that. No, it's not the body that doesn't like it. It just wasn't ready. It wasn't ready yet. So make smaller incremental steps, add a little bit more fiber to your diet each day. And pretty soon you'll be like, dang, those Brussels sprouts never tasted so good. I never felt so good after. I had a great bowel movement. It's amazing.
Yes.
It's anyway.
Someone is asking, and I have a bunch of questions that I want to make sure we get to, but can you overdose on probiotics?
It would be really hard. It would be really hard. So just to put it in context, I have never seen anybody overdose on probiotics ever. So, and that's for a couple of reasons. One, because who would want to, right? And it could be expensive. Why would you want to take too many? But number two is they're just really safe. I just never seen it. I don't think that should be really a concern. Typically, if you take more than maybe you need, guess what? You just poop them out. Big deal. Yeah. And even in the just big scheme of things, what's really interesting, Liz, and I don't think we fully appreciate this part, but we know the data shows not only that probiotics are safe, they are safe, but there's actually dozens of studies that show they're helpful. But what's interesting? It's not like you take, say, bifidobacterium, and then I measure my stool a few hours later, all of a sudden I'm going to have a spike in bifidobacterium. It doesn't quite work that way. And so some of them are just, I would say, transient folks in the gut. They don't necessarily stay there, but they communicate with the gut bacteria that you have, and they really effectively can help repopulate. But that doesn't necessarily, to answer your question, no, I've never seen anybody overdose on probiotics. Could somebody? Of course, anything's possible, but it's just not something that people need to be worrying about.
Yeah. Well, and then they're asking, is there a good test for gut bacteria?
Yeah, so there's several different tests where you basically do a stool sample, and it will give you sort of the makeup. It'll tell you the percentages of each of the common, what we call commensal bacteria. Then we kind of group them into sort of the helpful commensals and then the less helpful ones, because we all have in our gut millions of different bacteria, and some of them are really, really good and helpful, like the ones I've mentioned, the lactobacillus, the bifidobacterium, the akkermansia. Then we have some that are really nasty, like Clostridia, for example. Clostridia, you guys have heard of that. That's C. diff, Clostridia difficile. That's like this really angry, horrible, horrible bloody diarrhea that you can get, that sometimes people will get after they take antibiotics, because the antibiotics, right, they kind of kill indiscriminately. They kill what we're trying to kill if it's an infection, but they also can kill our good gut bacteria. And so what comes up is those low levels of C. diff, for example, will start to grow, and they will kind of overpower the good guys who have been killed with the antibiotics. And then you can get this nasty bacterial dysentery called C. diff colitis that can be life-threatening. And guess what's the newest, latest, and greatest treatments for this? It's a stool transplant. It's literally a poop transplant from a healthy person can help cure these people. So
Wow.
I'm not looking forward to having a stool transplant myself, but I want to optimize my gut so that I could be a provider of that for somebody else, or just so I never have to, take somebody else's poop, because that doesn't sound very desirable, but it actually can be a life-saving treatment.
So with these tests, where do you look for them? Who do you ask? Do you ask your general practitioner for this test, or do you
Yeah.
how do
Yeah.
you
So general practitioners will probably do the classic eye roll, because number one, they're just not trained in this kind of thing. And most of them aren't familiar with the data and what it even all means. So I would say for physicians out there that would do this, it generally would be somebody in the integrative and functional medicine sphere. So if you don't have this type of a provider, somebody that practices functional medicine or integrative medicine, it's easy to find one. You can go to like the ifm.org website. I'm a part of that. I'm one of the providers there, but there's traditional doctors don't have a lot of training in this. And so anybody who's in that integrative and functional medicine space would have a better idea on how to order these tests. And I don't want to get into, there's a lot of them. And so it's not really important to share all those on this talk, but that you want to find somebody that you trust, that you get along with, that has your same health goals in mind. And if it's with respect to these kind of bacterial stool testing, sadly, most traditional trained Western doctors are not that familiar with this stuff. So they may give you the eye roll, and that's okay. You don't have to necessarily fire them, but you might want to have somebody that's more holistic or integrative to kind of guide you through this part.
Great. So the question, there's a question here about like, what do we look for in probiotics, and where do we find them?
Yeah.
I'm guessing your chapter in your book like breaks down.
So in this book right here, I have a whole chapter. Not specifically on probiotics, though we talk about that. I have a whole chapter on supplementation, and in light of what we were talking about at the beginning, it's actually fairly simple. I have a couple sort of big bang for your buck kind of supplements that everybody should probably be on. Things like an omega-3, right? An omega-3, those are traditionally found in things like fish oil and whatnot, but there's a few varieties of omega-3 that we'd really like to have. That's DHA and EPA. Those are really, really good for our brain health. They're good for our cardiovascular health. They're great anti-inflammatories. And most of us don't get enough in the diet. So I speak to that. I speak about vitamin D, for example, which most of us are deficient in. I speak about magnesium, one of the most important minerals that we really need for 600 plus enzymatic reactions in our body, including the one that keeps us alive each and every day, right? The respiration, the energy production that we make from ATP, adenosine triphosphate, can't even happen without magnesium. So I speak about magnesium. I speak about multivitamins because there's lots of confusion about multivitamins. And the moral of the story is you want something that your body can actually use, something that has bioavailable forms in there. Like folate, for example, you want a real methylated folate, not folic acid, which is basically just taken from the chemistry lab, and your body can't absorb it as well. It'll still work. It just works less good. So I describe all that in the book, but with respect to which ones, I would say any company that uses a quality control, a third-party validation process. I mean, I don't buy any supplements that come from China. Nothing I have against China per se, but I just don't really trust that the quality is the same. So the sourcing also matters. So you need to know the source. You need to know if they have third-party validation. You need to know if it's tested for both quality as well as efficacy, because sadly, they don't have the tremendous scrutiny in supplementation that they do in other areas, like pharmaceuticals, for example, have to meet a certain bare minimum requirement as far as efficacy and quality. And that isn't required for supplements, because most people don't know this, but the FDA does not govern supplementation. In other words, if you want to market your own supplement, you don't have to get approved with the FDA. You just don't.
You
And
just
so,
say, this is a probiotic, and no one's ever going to look.
yeah,
Like,
and nobody's going to
put a
look. But
label
so
on a
I look
sugar
to
pill.
companies that have great quality control processes, both in the sourcing, the efficacy, and safety. Third-party validation is great, and I just look that it comes from a good source, and a lot of them can actually come from real foods too. Like when I buy vitamin C, I buy the vitamin C that comes from a real food, right? There's certain types of fruit, like the camu berry, for example, that is a great source of vitamin C. So why wouldn't you try to take something that's more natural? But
Mhm.
that's all in the book. I don't want to get too much in the
Yeah.
weeds, but
Yeah, I just think like there are a few things people can look for on a label
yeah.
if they're somewhere, right? That's
Mhm.
third party tested. You're
Yeah.
going to see it's going to say right on the label, third party
Mhm.
tested. Then we have these sort of regulatory arms that do, like the USP, all of these
Yeah.
little things they can look for on a label to know that they're not getting some
Yeah.
sugar pill that's just been
Yeah.
labeled probiotics.
Some expensive sugar pill that says it's a probiotic or something. And yeah,
Yeah.
so I look for all that. I look for, the non-GMO, the gluten-free, all of that stuff too. If that's important to you, I personally think it is. So I look for that on the label as well. And yeah, and people can reach out to me specifically if they want to say, hey, Dr. Hemingway, like, what do you and your family take? I'd be happy to share that. I take more than one brand of supplements. I'm just going to be honest. There's so many great ones out there. There's not just one that's like the very, very best of everything. I found that certain companies are great in the probiotic sphere. Others are great more in the vitamins and mineral sphere. And so I mean, if you looked at my supplement cabinet, you'd be like, oh my gosh, like you spend
Yeah.
a lot of money on supplements. Well, yes, but I include that in my food budget. It's in my
Oh,
food budget because I want to feel great, not just today, but for the next 50 years, because I'm going to live to 100 at least. And so I got 50 years left and I want to great until then. So I'm going to be supplementing until the day I die. It's just that simple. And I'll be honest, I had a little bit of a good example to kind of get me on that road. My grandfather, he took supplements before they were a thing. Like he would literally have a handful, like 30 or 40 supplements. And this was like 60 years ago, 50 years ago. Like when I was a little tiny kid, he would take this huge handful. He was the kind of guy that bought the brewer's yeast and he would make his little drink every morning. And it was amazing because he had the same diabetes that my daughter had. He had type 1 diabetes and he lived until he was 94 years old. He
wow.
never got any visual problems. He didn't lose his vision. He didn't have any problems with his kidney function. He never lost a digit, not a toe, nothing.
Wow.
But because he was so into eating real food and he supplemented. And it's an amazing story. Like that's the only guy I've ever witnessed that has lived till 94 with diabetes. I've just never seen it before. His diabetes was his whole life, but it did not hinder him a single bit because he cared about his food and he supplemented well. So
Well, so I have a couple of other questions here that were sent in as people knew I'd be talking to you. So, one of them is, when attempting to lose weight and have elevated LFTs, are there any supplements that you'd recommend taking?
yeah,
Um,
sure. I'm gonna take the liberty of answering a couple of questions in one. So anything that supports the liver, and I think of glutathione as a main sort of supportive supplement, if you will. So I personally take glutathione. That's a great sort of liver help. But with respect to the liver and having LFTs, um, sadly, there's lots of people that have this. So if you have it, you're you're fine in the sense that it's so common. I mean, it's like 60 something percent of adults in the US have elevated LFT. So you're not alone. But you know what's cool is you can fix this relatively quickly and easily. And most of it has to do with the first thing we talked about, which is the food, right? The number one food that causes elevated LFTs liver enzymes is sugar, especially fructose, more especially high fructose corn syrup. So the sooner you ditch the sugars, especially anything that has corn syrup in it, your liver numbers, the LFTs, will start to go down. In fact, today, present day, this has never happened before, but present day, the number one cause of liver transplant is not alcoholic cirrhosis like it was when I did my medical training. It's actually preventable non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. The number one cause present day for liver transplant, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, which is completely preventable, largely through diet. But there are supportive mechanisms like taking glutathione and other liver supporting supplements that can be helpful as well. But the number one thing is you got to ditch the sugar.
Okay. So another question is, what are adaptogens, and should I be taking them? Any food sources I can get them from, or do I have to take a supplement?
Yeah, so adaptogens is a really kind of cool subject to talk about, and they are found in plants, they are found in foods, they are found in many places. It's basically like the other word you heard here often besides adaptogen is they'll say it's a adaptogenic herb, for example. And basically all that means is that it is something that we have, number one, we found it, so we can give it a name, we can call it something, but we've seen this natural substance, whether it be ginkgo, for example, or whether it be something from a mushroom, like it doesn't matter. These adaptogenic herbs are naturally occurring. So we're not making them in the chemistry lab. So they're a little bit different than like a vitamin C or what's called ascorbic acid that they throw into your multivitamin that they literally make in a laboratory. In the same laboratory that makes a pharmaceutical or medication, a lot of the times they make like multivitamins, for example, they synthesize it. It's synthetic. Adaptogenic herbs and adaptogens, they are natural. So that's the number one cool thing. They're actually real substances you find in nature, usually in a plant, but they can also be in a fruit as well. And you, what was the question about them? I forget. Now I got it.
Yep. What are they?
What are they? Okay. Yes. Okay. So yeah, they're naturally occurring substances usually found in plants and foods that have been recognized to cause a physiologic effect. So a physiologic effect would be, for example, you take this adaptogenic herb and it tends to lower your blood pressure naturally, for example. Or this one tends to improve reflux or GERD. You know, like that licorice, for example. I'm kind of giving you one of the things that I like. That's a natural remedy for stomach acid problems or GERD is licorice. So it's just any of these naturally occurring. Usually they're from plants. There's actually a book. Gosh, what was the name? The adaptogenic. I'll think of it and I'll message it to you. I interviewed the folks who started the company called Four Sigmatic, and they're really cool people. I had them on my podcast. I don't know. It's been quite a while, but they wrote a book called The Adaptogenic Something, and I just can't. It's been a couple of years since I interviewed them, so I don't remember the title of the book, but it was a cool book because it described a lot of these naturally occurring substances that we should look for both in our food or in our herbal supplementation regimen. And the number one thing I like about them is they're natural. So they're naturally occurring and they have qualities that can boost our own health. They can boost immune system. They can boost our metabolic activity. There's so many things that they can do, but the number one thing is they're natural and they've been shown to cause a physiologic response. That's what an adaptogen is.
Amazing. Okay, that's super helpful. Another question is around collagen. Should I be taking it daily? And is the form that I can sort of mix into something like my coffee as a creamer as potent as a pill?
Yes. So yes, they can be as potent. I personally take a powder and I mix it in with one of my drinks. It could be a protein shake. It just depends because I take protein shakes, not every single day, but it just kind of depends on if I, need to skip a meal or something because I'm too busy. I'll just do a couple scoops of my favorite protein shake. I'll throw in a scoop of collagen as well. So yes, it can be as effective in a powder form that you would put in a smoothie or your coffee or whatever, as if you take it in a capsule. Absolutely 100%. Collagen is really cool because it is the most prominent, most people don't have any idea, but it is actually the most prominent protein in your whole body is collagen. And it's really, really important, not just for, the muscles and the bones and all the things we usually think about, but ladies, I think, have this on their mind. It's really important in skin, right? Like the reason we show our age is because our collagen declines as we age. The production, the synthesis actually declines. And so it's even more important. And this is crazy to even say, but after about 16 or 17 years old, your collagen production starts to go down that early in life, like pretty darn young, And
Yeah.
so it becomes even more important now for many of us that might be in their 40s and 50s and beyond, to really include that as part of our food budget, if you will. And I'm all for doing the bone broth and stuff, but for a lot of people, that's not super practical.
Yeah.
It's not, it takes a lot more time. It's great if you can do it and you can make yourself do that regularly. It's fantastic. I personally, I've tried it. I've tried to make my own bone broth and whatnot, but it takes a lot of time. So right now I'm taking the easy card here, and I'm just doing a collagen supplement that's a powder. And that's what I'm doing currently. But I also do capsules. The ones I do in capsules are the ones for my joints, because that's a different type of collagen. For the skin, we usually take type 1 and type 3. Those are the common ones. But for the joints, it's hard to get the amount that you would need in one of the powders, because they usually focus specifically on like the skin, for example, because most of us, including me, we care about our skin, And so I often take both a supplement capsule and a powder, and they can both be really, really effective.
Okay. And what is the collagen that is? So 1 in 3, it sounds like, are sort of skin, and then collagen
Well,
for.
type 2, there's like 32. The ones that I think most people are going to be seeing in products out there, 1, 2, and 3 are the most common, because number one, they are most prominent in our body. But there are other important types. Type 4 collagen is important as well, both in the heart. The heart has a lot more of that type of collagen. But yeah, there's like 30 something types. And I forget, every year, it seems like they discover a new type of collagen. But I would say making a collagen product, especially when you're over 20, which is probably all of us here,
Yeah,
is important.
I love
We
that.
can all
That's amazing. Well, as we wrap up, I mean, we could go all night, honestly. You're just so amazing. But I wanted to just find out what that last S is.
Oh yeah, sure. So the last S, it's FMSGs, G's with the S plural. And the last one is stress. Stress is, I think, something finally, yay, we're appreciating a lot more as something critical to our health to be able to optimize, because we're all going to have stress. And in fact, all of us, especially the last 3-4 years during the pandemic, we've had a lot more stress than we were used to having, but we are finally appreciating it a little bit more, and the importance of learning to really use it as something that we can put as a tool to help us be healthier and better, because you can have good stress and bad stress, right? But we all have stress and we're exposed to it, whether we like to or not. It's part of life. But if we learn to optimize the stressful things that come our way, both in an adaptive approach, the so-called, instead of the classic, runaway, fight and flight that we have survived with for millennia, that's what keeps us alive, that fight or flight sympathetic nervous system. It keeps us out of harm's way. We can run away from a predator or what have you, but revving that up 24/7 all day long, like a lot of us during the pandemic, we were super stressed out, including me, both because I was still working at the hospital, and having to be exposed and be in situations which were stressful in and of themselves, and then having exposures and things like that. It was really, really stressful. But what I have learned is that a lot of the end effect and result of stress, a lot of it actually happens right between our ears. A lot of it we're in control of, which is really cool. The sort of landmark study about this was done in 2012, and it was on nearly 200,000 patients. And all they asked them to do was rate their stress as high, medium, or low. And then they followed them for, I forget, 10 or 20 years. And they looked at how many had health problems, how many died younger, all these kinds of things. And the second part of that not only was how high stress they had in their life, but what meaning they attached to that stress. So no big surprise, the people who had high stress and believed that stress was bad for them, that inherently there was something bad about stress. They could get health challenges. They could even die younger. Guess what? It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. It was like 30 some odd percent of them died sooner because they believed that stress was bad for them. However, what was way more interesting than that, which most of us probably could have predicted, is that people in that same very high stress group, those that believed right here between their ears and in their head that the stress could actually be good. It could be a growth promoting experience. Like a lot of us had lots of these during the pandemic. We had to pivot with the type of work we do. We had to figure out how to work from home, or we had to change change from brick and mortar to online, or whatever it was. We had to do this pivot. We changed that stress into a growth, or what we call in the psychological world, a challenge response. Those people actually had a protective effect. In other words, they lived longer. It was beneficial. They had less health conditions, yet they still had the highest level of stress. So that's, I think, so mind-blowing, because it is something, Liz, that you and I and all the folks that are listening right now, we have control over that. The ball is in our court. We are the only ones that can decide the meaning that we attach to stress. So that's super cool, super empowering. And then, of course, I detail all the fun stuff that we can do on a day-to-day basis to optimize our response to stress, whether it be through breathing exercise, through the movement that we talked about at the very beginning, through nature. Nature is one of my favorite tools, getting outside. Like, I don't know if you know the story, Liz, but I literally lost the entire manuscript of this book about 2.5 years ago, and I had to rewrite the overwhelming majority of it. And I felt horrible. It was some weird fluke with the cloud. I was saving it and transferring onto a physical hard drive from the cloud, and literally the cloud went poof. And I found that they have no backup for the cloud. There's literally no backup to the cloud. If something happens with the cloud, that's it. So I lost the overwhelming majority of the book, and I had to rewrite probably 80% of it. Okay. And right when that happened, oh my gosh, I was like, the world just ended. I mean, it was like a huge stress. But what I did, I went outside and I literally took 15 minutes. I was close to a beach. I went out to the beach, and I think I caught one wave. I had my surfboard. I literally went out there, and the surf wasn't even good, but I went out there and caught one wave, had the salt flush through my sinuses, took a couple of deep breaths, and I came back and I kind of regrouped, and I decided, you know what? This book is going to be even better than before, because I'm going to put even more into it. It's going to, and I rewrote basically nearly the whole book after I had lost it. But the reason I was able to do that was through the power of nature as one of the most amazing tools to kind of de-stress or help us to optimize stress. So I talk about that in the book. I talk about all of these, what we call so in our body, we have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, right? Well, there's a special nerve called the vagus nerve. It's not VEGAS, like what goes in Vegas stays in Vegas. No, what happens on this vagus nerve literally transmits to the whole body. It doesn't stay on that nerve. It literally goes everywhere. This is kind of the mind, body, gut nerve, right? This is the gut brain connection. The vagus nerve is super cool, but there are lots of things that you can do to strengthen that nerve. Everything from fun stuff, like singing in the shower, that actually strengthens vagus nerve, for example. Like meditation with doing the mantra that you're repeating, that sound, that vocalization that happens here in your voice box, that actually strengthens the vagus nerve. All the breathing stuff that we like to do, whether it be box breathing or the Wim Hof or whatever you choose, all of that strengthens this vagus nerve. So there's so many cool things. Putting your face in a bowl of ice, which is what I do, because I don't have a cold plunge. Everybody talks about, oh, cold plunge this, cold plunge that. I don't have a cold plunge. I put my face in a bowl of ice if I need to. And so all of these things strengthen the vagus nerve, and they are just amazing tools. And so optimizing the stress in our life is so critical, not just for the day-to-day so we feel better, but so we can balance our hormones, so we can actually not be in that tired and wired state at the end of the day where we're lying in bed, we're exhausted, and we just can't turn it off. That's because of stress. So in the book, I talk all about that as well, how to optimize.
Amazing. Well, you are a national treasure. We are so lucky to have you as a friend and a part of our community. Let's put your book, good. I was going to say, let's put your book up in there. Someone's asking if it's on Audible. Is it on Audible yet?
Well, you're looking at the guy who's going to do the Audible. So a crazy story for another day. So this book, the easiest place right now is to get it on Amazon.
Yep.
So it's also on Kindle, of course. So it's Amazon and Kindle. Yep. And soon it will be on Audible, but I'm the reader. So I've read a big portion of it, but if you, like me, hate the sort of computerized voices that you're like, oh my gosh, why do I have to listen to a robot voice? This is so annoying. So I'm going to read my own book. And if you haven't got a feel for my passion and whatnot and all that, you can also check out my podcast, which is called the Unshakable Health Podcast. I actually read, I think the first 2 chapters on my podcast in the last month or two. So if people want a sneak peek at the book, if they go to my podcast, which is called the Unshakable Health Podcast, they can actually get a sneak peek at the first couple chapters of the book, because I read it. I read it for the podcast. So that's kind of fun. But the answer is no, it is not on Audible yet. Not yet.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. This is amazing. I've got your links up here. We'll put them out on our thing. We'll put them in our community. We'll put them on all our social media, because I think this is just such a great, amazing compliment to what we do at Target 100, and just so many wonderful tips and tricks and extra bonus pieces that people really want to know. So thank you for your time. I know you with 6 kids, a new book, a practice, all of it. It's not easy. So
Oh, I appreciate you, Liz. I'm happy to come on. I'll come on again in the future if you'd
good.
have me. It's always a pleasure. It's always a fun chat. I feel like there's probably more questions out there, and you guys can reach out to me as well. My Instagram is just my name, basically, with a doctor in front of it, or a Dr. Thomas Hemingway. That's my Instagram. And I actually answer all of my own messages. And so I think Liz does the same. Not a lot of us folks that are on there, that are doing what we're doing, answer all their own messages. I do all mine personally. I don't pay anybody to do it. I don't have my kid do it. Like, I literally do all of my own messages. So feel free to reach out there if you want specifics about anything, like, hey doc, what supplements do you actually take for X, Y, or Z? I'll share them with you. I don't mind at all. But you can also ask me questions. You can email me, whatever. Those, I think Liz will provide you with all those links. But I'm happy to be of service to you guys. I want you guys to reach all of your health goals, to feel better, to really thrive. My goal is to have everybody thrive, not just survive life, is to truly thrive. That's what I'm passionate about. So don't be afraid to reach out to me. That would be just fine.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you. Everyone saying thank you. Have a beautiful day, and we'll see you very soon.
All right. Thanks again. Aloha.
Aloha. Bye.